The voice that seduces. There are books that whisper. And then there are books that sing so beautifully, you forget they're leading you somewhere dark. Lolita is one of those books, the kind that glows with language so bright it blinds you before it breaks your heart. Written in 1955 by Vladimir Nabokov, a Russian émigré who taught literature, collected butterflies, and played with English like it was silk, Lolita became both scandal and masterpiece. It was banned in several countries, yet it transformed Nabokov from a wandering academic into a literary legend. He went on to win the National Book Award for Pale Fire and is now remembered as one of the greatest stylists of the 20th century, a man who could make even sin sound symphonic. At its core, Lolita is the confession of Humbert Humbert, a European intellectual who becomes obsessed with a 12-year-old girl named Dolores Hayes, his Lolita. The story unfolds as a confession written from prison, half apology, half performance, and entirely unforgettable. Listen to the rhythm of its opening line, one of the most famous in all of literature. Lolita, light of my life, fire of my loins, my sin, my soul. Those words shimmer like poetry, but they hide a tragedy. Nabokov once said he wanted readers to notice the pattern behind the pain. That's what we'll be exploring today, the beauty and the danger of that pattern. So if you love stories that challenge the limits of art and morality, stories that make you question not only the characters, but yourself, then stay close. Like the video, subscribe to Echoes of Books. And if you want to keep the channel alive, maybe buy me a coffee or donate so we can keep building this world of words together. A road trip through obsession. The story of Lolita begins, like many tragedies, with nostalgia disguised as poetry. Humbert Humbert, a European scholar with a cultivated accent and impeccable manners, writes his confession from prison. He is charming, articulate, and utterly broken, a man who believes language can redeem what it cannot excuse. He begins by telling us about his childhood in the French Riviera, where he fell in love with a girl named Annabelle Lee. She died of typhus, leaving him with what he calls a hollow in his heart. That loss, he insists, fixed his desire forever on girls of that same age, nymphets, he calls them, a word he invents to make his obsession sound mythical rather than monstrous. Years pass. Humbert becomes a professor of literature, moves to America, and tries to live as a respectable man. But everywhere he goes, he sees echoes of that first lost love, Annabelle's ghost hiding behind the faces of young girls on beaches, in playgrounds, on sidewalks. It's a haunting of his own making. Eventually, he rents a room in the house of a lonely widow named Charlotte Hayes. She is middle-aged, talkative, and eager to be admired. Humbert pretends to court her, but his true interest lies in her daughter, Dolores, a 12-year-old girl with a heart-shaped face, a scatter of freckles, and the careless confidence of childhood. He calls her Lolita, and with that new name, she ceases to be a person in his eyes and becomes an idea, a private fiction dressed in beauty. Charlotte falls in love with Humbert, not realizing she's only a prop in his fantasy. When she discovers his diary, filled with confessions of lust and deceit, she runs into the street in shock and is struck by a car. Humbert inherits not only her house, but her daughter. He tells himself this is fate. The reader already knows it is a crime. He picks Lolita up from summer camp and tells her that her mother is in the hospital. They drive across America, through small towns, roadside motels, diners glowing with neon. To anyone watching, they look like father and daughter. Inside the car, there is something far darker happening. Humbert's narration dances around the truth, covering it in clever metaphors and lyrical fragments. He insists she seduced him. He calls their journey a love story. But Nabokov lets the real story flicker through. The fear, the manipulation, the silence of a child trapped inside someone else's fantasy. Their road trip becomes a kind of fever dream of mid-century America. Humbert lists the motels they visit like an incantation: the melting pot, the enchanted hunters, the pine cone. He fills his pages with landscapes, gas stations, red mountains, cheap postcards, but behind every description is a desperate attempt to make horror look like beauty. Lolita herself is never silent, but her words are filtered through his. We catch glimpses of her sarcasm, her boredom, her quick flashes of humor. She wants comic books, Sundays, movie stars, small, ordinary things that belong to a child. Humbert, always writing, always narrating, turns those details into poetry. It is perhaps Nabokov's cruelest irony that the same gift of language that makes the novel brilliant also makes Humbert's delusion persuasive. As months pass, their relationship fractures. Lolita grows sullen, distant, defiant. Humbert becomes paranoid, jealous, convinced someone is following them. He's right. A shadowy figure named Claire Quilty, a decadent playwright and Humbert's moral twin, has been trailing them across the country. Quilty once seduced Lolita before, in a different setting, and now represents the mirror Humbert cannot bear to face, the reflection of his own corruption, stripped of its poetry. Eventually, Lolita escapes, vanishing from his life. Humbert is left wandering through America alone, consumed by guilt and madness. Years later, he finds her again, no longer a child, but a young woman, married, pregnant, and living in poverty. She tells him she doesn't love him, never did, but she accepts the money he offers. It is a heartbreaking scene, stripped of glamour, full of the plainness that truth requires. Humbert finally sees her as she is, a person, not a vision. He realizes, too late, that what he called love was only possession. He kills Quilty in a drunken rage, perhaps to destroy the mirror of his own self. Then he is arrested, tried for murder, and dies of heart failure in prison. Lolita dies not long after, giving birth to her child. Humbert's confession, written in his cell, becomes the novel we hold, a story inside a story, the echo of a crime disguised as literature. When readers first encounter Lolita, they often think it's about obsession or madness or forbidden desire. But read carefully, and it becomes a book about something more elusive, the way beauty can be used as camouflage. Nabokov's genius is that he makes us fall under the same spell that traps Humbert himself. We are dazzled, even as we begin to see through the light. In the next part, we'll step deeper into Nabokov's design, how he built this story like a mirror maze, how language becomes both weapon and confession, and why readers still argue about what the book means 70 years later. The architecture of a confession. Let's start with the thing that makes Lolita so hypnotic, the voice. Humbert's narration is a masterpiece of manipulation. It doesn't just tell a story, it performs it. From the very first sentence, he's addressing us directly, seducing us into sympathy before we even realize what's happening. He says, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury." And just like that, he turns us into participants in his trial. We're not just reading, we're being asked to judge, to listen, maybe even to forgive. Every sentence that follows is a kind of charm spell, woven from irony, intelligence, and rhythm. Humbert speaks with the musical confidence of someone who believes his eloquence can make the unbearable sound beautiful. But Nabokov is far too clever to let that charm go unpunished. The more beautifully Humbert speaks, the more we feel the contradiction between his words and his actions. When he describes Lolita's laughter, her quicksilver movement, her limpid tenderness, we're seduced by the lyricism, and then chilled when we remember who is speaking and what he's describing. The tension is deliberate. Nabokov turns language itself into the site of moral conflict. Humbert's prose is lush, full of repetition and wordplay, as if he's trying to control the world through syntax. It's no coincidence that he's a literature professor, a man trained to use language as power. In that sense, Lolita is a book about the danger of words when they become too elegant. Humbert's sentences dance to distract, like a magician waving one hand while the other commits the trick. If you listen closely, though, you can hear the cracks in his control. Sometimes, in a moment of guilt or fear, his voice trembles and we glimpse the truth behind the performance. For instance, when he writes, "You can always count on a murderer for a fancy prose style." That single line betrays him. It's witty, yes, but also a confession. The elegance becomes evidence. Nabokov, who was himself a master stylist, builds the entire novel around this paradox. The narrative form mirrors the crime. It's an act of seduction that hides violation. The confession becomes both plea and punishment. Every page is a courtroom, and we are both judge and accomplice. Now, notice how Nabokov plays with time. The story unfolds as memory, written from prison. The chronology loops and folds in on itself. Humbert recalls moments of beauty long after the harm has been done, trying to rearrange guilt into art. He edits reality like a director recutting a film, searching for a version of events that will justify his desire. This manipulation of time gives the book its strange rhythm, slow, nostalgic, then suddenly sharp and cruel. We drift with Humbert through landscapes of half-remembered motels, only to be jolted awake by a glimpse of real suffering. Nabokov wants us to feel that shift in our bodies, to sense the dissonance between memory and morality. Some scholars call this structure the architecture of self-deception. Humbert builds a cathedral of words around his guilt, each sentence a brick meant to keep judgment out. But like all elaborate constructions, it eventually collapses under its own weight. The longer he speaks, the more he reveals. His style, meant to protect him, becomes his undoing. There's also something theatrical about the whole performance. Nabokov loved chess problems, and you can feel that precision here, the way every rhetorical flourish sets up a later checkmate. Humbert may think he's in control of the narrative, but Nabokov positions him like a pawn. The reader, too, becomes part of this game. We're lured by the same music Humbert uses to justify himself, only to find we've been tricked into empathy we didn't mean to feel. And yet, it's that empathy that gives Lolita its enduring power. The book forces us to confront the unsettling truth that evil can speak beautifully. That language, the very tool we use to tell right from wrong, can sometimes blur the line completely. Nabokov doesn't want us to trust the voice. He wants us to examine why we ever did. This, then, is the foundation of the novel's architecture, a confession disguised as poetry, a manipulation wrapped in melody. Lolita is less about what happened than about how it's told, and what that telling does to the listener. In the next section, we'll shift focus from the manipulator to the silenced. We'll look for the traces of Dolores Hayes herself, the girl trapped inside Humbert's story, and the faint echoes of her real voice hidden beneath his beautiful lies. The girl without a voice. If Humbert's voice is the loudest in Lolita, then Dolores Hayes's is the quietest. In fact, much of the novel's pain comes from that silence. She is the title, the obsession, the center of every sentence, and yet she's barely allowed to speak for herself. We know her only through his descriptions, his metaphors, his corrections. He renames her Lolita, a nickname that erases her ordinary humanity. He calls her light of my life, fire of my loins. The language dazzles, but it also colonizes. In Nabokov's structure, Humbert is both narrator and thief, stealing not only her childhood but her story. And still, Nabokov leaves us small, precious cracks where her real self shines through. We see glimpses of Dolores in the margins of Humbert's narration, her sarcasm, her tiredness, her attempts to bargain with him. She wants comic books, Coca-Cola, a bicycle, to go see The Enchanted Hunters. She teases him, she lies, she laughs. These flashes remind us that behind the myth of Lolita stands a real 12-year-old girl, trying to survive the performance forced upon her. There's one moment that stays with me, when Humbert describes her crying after an argument, and he cannot explain why. He admits, "I wiped her tears, and then, all at once, she was in my arms." The language shifts mid-sentence, from guilt to justification, from empathy to self-excuse. It's heartbreaking because, in that flicker, we feel what Nabokov is doing, letting the reader sense the truth that Humbert refuses to face. The pain exists, but it's buried beneath his diction. Many feminist critics, especially in the 1980s and 1990s, read Lolita as a story about erasure, the violence of being spoken for. To them, Humbert's linguistic brilliance is itself a form of domination. It's not only her body he controls, it's her narrative. His words are the prison bars, his confession the lock. The critic Mary Gateskill once wrote that the most disturbing thing about Lolita is not the sex, but the charm. That the reader is seduced by Humbert's voice, even while knowing it is poison. This is precisely Nabokov's experiment. He doesn't just depict manipulation, he makes us experience it. We feel Dolores slipping away inside Humbert's syntax, and we realize how easily beauty can suffocate truth. But Nabokov, in his own sly way, resists total silence. He plants little rebellions in the text, subtle signs that the author, not the narrator, sees the girl clearly. Notice the way the prose sometimes turns plain when describing her suffering. Gone are the lush metaphors and elaborate wordplay. The sentences flatten, as if the music suddenly stops. For example, when Humbert reports that she refused to sleep with him and cried every night, Nabokov gives us the raw facts, without his usual ornament. That simplicity is his act of witness. It's his whisper to the reader, see her. Not his version of her, but her. Modern readers, especially those discovering Lolita through social media or classroom debates, often ask a simple question: why doesn't Dolores ever get to tell her side? It's a fair and painful question, one Nabokov never answers directly. Perhaps he understood that giving her a full voice within Humbert's confession would have broken the illusion of the book. Perhaps he wanted the silence to haunt us, to remain unresolved, as a moral echo that follows the prose long after it ends. Even the title itself is a kind of theft. Lolita isn't her name. It's a word Humbert invents, an incantation that transforms her from child to symbol. And yet, after publication, that invented name escaped the novel entirely. It entered culture as slang, as fashion, as a label for girls who never asked for it. That may be the cruelest afterlife of all, the world continuing Humbert's renaming without realizing it. Dolores Hayes, in the text, is funny, quick, impatient, sometimes manipulative in the only ways she can be. She wants independence, but she's trapped by the grown-up who controls every mile of the journey. When she finally runs away, she reclaims her story, if only for a moment. She marries, grows older, finds a kind of quiet dignity. But Nabokov gives her only a brief reappearance before death takes her again, childbirth, the most ordinary and human of endings, almost invisible amid Humbert's grand tragedy. If you listen to the rhythm of the book, that final silence is devastating. Humbert fills hundreds of pages trying to immortalize his version of her, but she vanishes in a single line. She died in childbed, giving birth to a stillborn girl. That's all. One sentence. And yet, it's the truest sentence in the novel. The rest is his invention. This is her reality. When readers today reclaim her real name, Dolores Hayes, they're doing more than an act of correction. They're performing what Nabokov left unfinished, returning her humanity. It's an act of reading against the narrator, of rescuing the girl hidden in the story's shadow. In the next section, we'll step back and look at the wider landscape, the world they drive through, that strange, glittering America of the 1950s. Because Lolita is not only a story of one man and one girl, it's also a portrait of a country, of its highways, its advertisements, its obsession with youth, and of the dream that makes exploitation look like freedom. America through a foreigner's eyes. There's a second journey happening in Lolita, not just like Humbert and Dolores driving from town to town, but Nabokov himself traveling through America, seeing it with the astonished eyes of an outsider. Beneath the story's scandal lies something broader and strangely tender, a portrait of a new world seen by a man who had lost several old ones. Remember that Nabokov was born into privilege in pre-revolutionary Russia. He fled his country after 1917, lived in Berlin and Paris, and finally came to the United States during World War II. He arrived as an exile, teaching at small universities, chasing butterflies in the American countryside, writing in a language that was not his own. America was both refuge and puzzle. It was bright, wide, loud, so different from the Europe he had lost. And in Lolita, he records that dazzlement and confusion with the precision of a man who observes everything but belongs nowhere. The novel's road trip becomes a kind of ethnography of mid-century America. Motels with names like The Enchanted Hunters and The Melting Pot. Highways stretching endlessly between neon-lit towns with slogans on their billboards and the same hamburger smell in the air. Humbert's narration is full of lists, of places, products, and meaningless repetitions. To him, it's all noise. To Nabokov, it's a new poetry of surfaces. Through Humbert's disdain, Nabokov satirizes both the tourist and the host. Humbert mocks America as vulgar and childish, yet he's the one acting out the most grotesque fantasy of all. He sees the country as naive, unrefined, full of cliches, but it's his own obsession that turns the landscape grotesque. Every roadside diner becomes a stage for his delusion. Every billboard for soda or perfume becomes a kind of accidental mirror, selling innocence as a product. Critics have often noted how Lolita captures the spirit of American consumerism right as it was blossoming in the 1950s. The economy was booming. Cars, televisions, and new suburbs promised happiness packaged in convenience. Desire itself became something you could buy, and Nabokov, keen observer that he was, saw how easily beauty could turn into merchandise. Humbert's pursuit of Lolita mirrors that culture's pursuit of youth, endless, restless, and always unsatisfied. When Humbert drives across the continent, he's not only fleeing the law, he's consuming America, one motel room at a time. He takes photographs, collects souvenirs, and describes landscapes with collector's precision. It's a perverse tourism of possession. He doesn't really see the country any more than he sees Dolores. He catalogs it, names it, owns it in words. In that sense, Humbert is the perfect parody of a European colonial gaze, civilized, articulate, self-assured, and blind to the humanity of what he surveys. Nabokov uses that blindness to reflect something uncomfortable about Western culture itself, its habit of romanticizing what it dominates. Humbert's diary reads like an imperial map, beautifully drawn, ethically hollow, and yet, Nabokov's own feelings toward America were complicated. He loved its vastness, its nature, its sense of possibility. He once said that driving across the country collecting butterflies gave him the happiest years of his life. That joy occasionally leaks into the novel. The landscapes, though tainted by Humbert's purpose, sometimes glow with Nabokov's own wonder. When Humbert describes the luminous night, the stillness of the trees, the quivering of leaves in the motel's light, we sense the author peeking through, momentarily reclaiming the beauty that his narrator perverts. There's also a deep irony in the way Lolita redefines the American dream. The open road, the great symbol of freedom and reinvention, becomes a prison. The car, that sleek emblem of independence, becomes a cage on wheels. Each motel, meant to promise adventure and comfort, becomes another anonymous cell. Nabokov dismantles the optimism of post-war America by showing how easily freedom can turn into control when the wrong person is driving. The sociologist Lionel Trilling once remarked that Lolita was an allegory of obsession, not just of one man, but of an entire civilization in love with its own reflection. He was right. Humbert's longing for the eternal child echoes a culture obsessed with youth, novelty, and pleasure. The shiny advertisements, the pastel diners, the constant movement, all of it forms a mirror in which Humbert's delusion looks disturbingly familiar. Even today, this reading feels sharp. Think about how media and advertising still idolize youth, how the line between admiration and exploitation remains blurred. Nabokov saw it coming. The way a society that sells beauty will eventually lose the ability to tell desire from harm. So, yes, Lolita is a personal tragedy, but it's also a roadmap of a particular moment in American history, one where comfort and corruption traveled hand in hand. Nabokov wasn't condemning America outright. He was holding up a mirror, forcing it to see the danger of confusing youth with purity, movement with meaning, style with soul. In the next segment, we'll leave the highways behind and look inward at how Nabokov turns beauty into a moral experiment. We'll ask what happens when language itself becomes seductive, when readers fall in love with the very sentences that disguise horror. Beauty, evil, and the reader. Every reader who opens Lolita goes through the same experience. At first, we're amazed by the prose. It's clever, witty, dazzling. Humbert's voice seems alive, tragic, ironic, poetic. Then, somewhere along the way, we realize what we've been admiring. And suddenly, the beauty feels dangerous. That moment, when the reader becomes aware of their own complicity, is the true genius of Nabokov's design. Lolita is not just about seduction, it performs it. It makes us feel the pleasure of Humbert's voice, only to confront us with what that pleasure conceals. In doing so, it asks a question most novels never dare to ask: can beauty itself be immoral? Nabokov was a stylist above all else. He cared about the shimmer of language, the play of rhythm and sound. He believed in art for art's sake, in the freedom of imagination unchained by politics or morality. But Lolita complicates that belief, because here, the very tool that makes his art beautiful, language, becomes the weapon of his narrator's deceit. Listen again to Humbert's words. You can always count on a murderer for a fancy prose style. That line is both joke and prophecy. He knows exactly what he's doing, dressing horror in velvet. The more eloquent he becomes, the more he hides. Nabokov wants us to feel that seduction, to fall for it, and then to recognize how easily we can be fooled by beauty. Many readers describe their first encounter with Lolita as unsettling, precisely because the language is so lovely. Humbert's descriptions, the sparkle of her braces, the ripple of laughter under the trees, are breathtaking until you stop to ask who is speaking and why. The horror is not hidden in spite of the style, it's hidden by the style. Nabokov turns the act of reading into a moral test. Will you continue to enjoy the sentence once you know what it's describing? This, I think, is what makes Lolita one of the most psychologically complex books ever written. It's not simply condemning its narrator. It's examining the reader's own threshold for empathy, for blindness, for beauty. When we admire Humbert's language, we're forced to confront how easily charm can masquerade as sincerity. In the 1960s, critics like Alfred Appel Jr. and Lionel Trilling praised Nabokov for elevating the novel beyond morality, for making art that existed in a realm of pure form. But by the 1990s, scholars like Elizabeth Patno and Linda Kaufman began pushing back, arguing that Lolita could never be morally neutral because its very structure reenacts the dynamics of control. The narrator's eloquence, they said, isn't just artistic brilliance, it's domination through words. And that's the paradox Nabokov built intentionally. He invites the reader to marvel at the music of Humbert's confession, but also to feel the nausea that comes from realizing what that music is hiding. It's a trap, but also a lesson. The reader learns not to trust beauty unexamined. There's a subtle shift that happens in the novel's later chapters. Humbert's prose, once full of elegance, begins to break down. The metaphors grow clumsy. The tone loses its ironic polish. When he finds Dolores again, older, married, pregnant, his voice suddenly sounds human for the first time. No clever wordplay, no philosophical gymnastics, just raw grief and guilt. He says, "I loved you. I was a pentapod monster, but I loved you." The line stumbles. It doesn't sing. It's awkward, desperate, and finally honest. That broken language, I think, is Nabokov's moral signature. After hundreds of pages of enchantment, the beauty collapses. What's left is plain truth, ugly, unpolished, real. It's as if the novel itself has sobered up from its own intoxication. The philosopher Theodor Adorno once wrote that, "There is no poetry after Auschwitz." Nabokov might not have agreed, but Lolita flirts with a similar idea, that sometimes beauty cannot redeem horror, it can only expose its limits. Humbert's final attempt to justify himself through language ends in silence. The eloquence that once made him godlike now betrays him as a man. Reader response theorists often describe this experience as ethical destabilization, a deliberate disorientation that forces us to participate in judgment rather than receive it. Nabokov doesn't tell us what to feel. He gives us the music and the dissonance, and leaves us to decide which one we'll listen to. And that's why Lolita still feels so modern. In an age flooded with persuasive voices, politicians, influencers, storytellers, Nabokov reminds us that eloquence is not the same as truth. The same skill that builds beauty can also disguise cruelty. The same rhythm that moves our hearts can silence someone else's. So maybe Lolita isn't just about obsession or perversion. Maybe it's about the seduction of language itself, the way words can make lies feel elegant, the way beauty can anesthetize conscience. In the next section, we'll look beyond the book, at its afterlife. How Lolita escaped the page and entered culture, how it became both a symbol and a misunderstanding, and what that says about the power and peril of storytelling itself. The Afterlife of Lolita. Every great book escapes its author eventually, but few have escaped as wildly or as tragically as Lolita. The word itself has drifted far from Nabokov's pages. In pop culture, Lolita no longer means Dolores Hayes, the child who suffered. It has become a label, shorthand for seduction, style, danger, or scandal. It's appeared in songs, in perfume ads, in fashion lines. There's a Lolita aesthetic on TikTok and Pinterest, short skirts, cherry lip gloss, and the idea of being both innocent and knowing. But this is not Nabokov's Lolita. It's Humbert's fantasy rebranded and sold back to the world. That transformation, from victim to icon, might be the most chilling proof of Nabokov's insight. He understood how easily beauty can overwrite truth, how language can make the unacceptable look alluring. When the name Lolita became cultural currency, it showed how deep that transformation could go. The world didn't just misunderstand the book, it repeated it. Let's trace that evolution. When Lolita was first published in 1955 by Olympia Press in Paris, it was dismissed by some critics as pornography, praised by others as genius, and banned in several countries. Nabokov insisted that it was neither moral sermon nor erotic fantasy, but a story about love and loss and language. Yet from the start, readers were polarized. Some admired the prose and ignored the pain. Others saw only the scandal and missed the art. Then came Stanley Kubrick's 1962 film, starring James Mason and Sue Lyon. Kubrick's adaptation, bound by censorship codes, could only imply what the book made explicit. So it became a dark comedy of manners, polished, ironic, and strangely distant. The famous poster image of Sue Lyon in heart-shaped sunglasses, licking a red lollipop, turned Lolita into a symbol of dangerous youth. The tagline read, "How did they ever make a movie of Lolita?" The question was a tease, and the marketing turned a tragedy into a brand. 3 decades later, Adrian Lyne's 1997 film tried to correct the tone, more faithful, more emotional, but by then, the myth was unstoppable. Lolita had become an adjective. You could buy Lolita fashion in Japan, read Lolita diaries, and find her name in pop songs from Lana Del Rey to The Police. Each time the word appeared, it drifted further from Dolores Haze. Literary critics responded to this cultural drift with a mixture of awe and despair. Some, like the scholar Sarah Weinman, began reclaiming Dolores' story through nonfiction projects, linking her to real-life cases of exploitation that inspired Nabokov. Others focused on the danger of romanticizing abuse through style, how easily empathy gets replaced by aesthetic fascination. The critic Azar Nafisi once said, "Lolita is not about a man's desire for a young girl. It's about a civilization that confuses lust with love, and love with possession." That confusion remains at the heart of the book's afterlife. We see it every time the name Lolita is used to describe a flirtatious teenager, every time fashion reuses her image without understanding her story. It's a testament to how seductive Humbert's narration still is, even outside the novel. But there's another side to this legacy, one that Nabokov himself might have appreciated: the endless rereading. Each generation finds a new way to approach Lolita. In the 1950s, it was a scandal about sex. In the 1970s, a masterpiece of modern style. In the 1990s, a feminist battleground. Today, it's being reinterpreted through trauma studies, post-colonial lenses, and digital culture. Readers now ask, what does it mean to consume a story built on someone else's silence? This conversation keeps the book alive. It ensures that Lolita is never just an ornament of literature, but a living question. Even on social media, on Reddit, TikTok, X, readers argue about it fiercely. Some defend Nabokov's genius, quoting his phrases like music. Others demand justice for Dolores, pointing out that calling her Lolita perpetuates Humbert's violence. A few younger readers, encountering the book for the first time, say it feels eerily modern, like a case study in grooming, narcissism, and self-justification. That tension between admiration and rejection is exactly what Nabokov designed. He wanted a book that could not be reduced to a single moral verdict, a novel that would continue to provoke discomfort long after the ink dried. And here we are, nearly 70 years later, still arguing, still unable to stop listening to that voice even as we condemn it. There's a curious beauty in that endurance. It means the story still works. It still exposes the fragile line between art and ethics, between looking and possessing. It still forces us to ask why we're drawn to what should repel us. So when we talk about Lolita's afterlife, we're really talking about our own reflection in it. How much of Humbert's delusion have we inherited as a culture? How often do we mistake eloquence for truth, aesthetics for empathy, charm for goodness? Nabokov's novel is not just surviving, it's still teaching, still accusing, still asking us to see what language can do when it becomes too beautiful for its own good. And that brings us, finally, to the end of our journey, the part where we put the book down and look at ourselves. Because if Lolita is a mirror, then the last question it leaves us with is not about Humbert or Dolores. It's about us, the readers who kept listening. The mirror test. So here we are, the final page of Lolita. The car has stopped, the diary is finished, the voice of Humbert finally silent. And what's left is not an answer, but a question that seems to echo long after the book closes. Why does a novel so disturbing, so morally fraught, still move us? Why do we keep returning to it, teaching it, quoting it, arguing about it, even when we know the story will break our hearts again? Maybe because Nabokov knew something about us that we don't like to admit. He knew that language, when it's beautiful enough, can make us forgive almost anything. He knew that readers crave beauty, even when it hurts. And he turned that craving into a test, not of intelligence, but of conscience. When Humbert speaks, we fall under his spell. When we awaken from it, we see how easy it is to be fooled by charm, by eloquence, by art. Nabokov doesn't give us a villain to hate. He gives us a voice to doubt, a mirror to hold. Every reader who finishes Lolita has to face that reflection, to ask not what Humbert did, but why we listened so long before saying stop. And yet, that's also what makes the novel so necessary. It reminds us that beauty without truth is dangerous, that empathy without awareness can be a form of blindness. It teaches us to read not just with admiration, but with vigilance, because the next Humbert may not come to us in a novel. He might arrive in a movie, a headline, a song, or even a story we tell ourselves. Some books entertain, some educate. A few, like Lolita, hold a candle to the darkest corners of the human mind and dare us to keep looking. It's a work of art that unsettles precisely because it's alive, still arguing, still shimmering, still whispering that beauty is never innocent. And maybe that's the real miracle of Nabokov's writing, that even inside a story of corruption, he managed to preserve something pure, not in Humbert, not even in Dolores, but in the act of reading itself. Every time we resist the lie, every time we remember the girl behind the name, we pass the test. So let me leave you with this. When art makes you love something you know you shouldn't, is that the failure of the artist or the proof of their power? If that question lingers with you, then Nabokov has done his work, and maybe I've done mine. Thank you for listening to Echoes of Books. If this journey moved you, leave a comment below. Tell me when you first read Lolita, or whether you still can. Like the video, share it with a friend who loves stories that haunt. And if you'd like to help this channel grow, consider subscribing or donating so we can keep exploring the worlds hidden between pages.